Hey everyone, and welcome into FCC Talk. I'm your host, John Rose, the Chairman and Affiliate Minister here at First Christian Church, joined today by CJ Mustin, the Student Minister here at First Christian Church. And happy Thanksgiving! We are recording this before Thanksgiving, but it does release on Thursday, which is Thanksgiving. So if you're driving to family's house or whatever you might be doing and you decided to pop this on, maybe you're getting ready for Thanksgiving at your house, we're glad that you tuned in with us, and we hope that we can bring you some good conversation today. CJ, before we get started, do you and your family do anything like tradition wise for Thanksgiving that's kind of like unique to you all? Obviously, everybody eats like the turkey or the ham or whatever else there might be, but is there anything
Absolutely.
you guys do that's kind of unique for your family?
We like to play Grinch Clue. So it's just a regular Clue game, but it's Grinch edition. And so we love to play that every single Thanksgiving. It's an absolute blast. How about you, John? Do you guys do anything?
We have so it's my side of the family, Hannah's side of the family. They're fun, but they're not as fun. We have a lot of boy cousins in our family. I only have one girl cousin on the other side. So about 8 years ago, we started feats of strength at Thanksgiving,
Huh?
where we just go around and do a whole bunch of manly activities, and sometimes it's throwing cinder blocks, sometimes it's chopping wood, sometimes it's pushing cars, whatever it is. No one's been injured yet, but we're all getting older, so I'm sure it'll happen at some point.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's always a fun thing. You always kind of like leading up to it, you're like, do I really want to do this again this year? And then by the time we're all there and we're
Yeah,
doing it, it's like, okay, this is a fun thing that we get to do every year. So
that is cool.
we started by running a mile, and then as we all got older, we were like, yeah, we don't want to run a mile anymore. So anyway, we hope that you have a good Thanksgiving. We're going to be talking about some subjects today that aren't really Thanksgiving centric, but they are kind of some news topics that happened over the weekend. CJ and I are recording this on Monday. So if anything you hear here you've already heard about, that's probably why. But we're going to talk about them. We do stay away from politics. As a reminder, we do stay away from politics. Every now and then we might have a discussion that may mention it or something like that, but that's not typically what we want our discussion to be centered around. We want to give you ministry insights, kind of a peek into our lives sometimes, because sometimes not everybody gets to see more than maybe just us on Sunday mornings. And then we may sprinkle in some Bible here and there, but we don't aim for this to be a sermon. We don't aim for this to be like, the most holy teaching you're ever going to get in the world or anything. It's just kind of us talking about, stuff that's going on in the world and trying to have some good spiritual conversations from it. So this one I thought was interesting, and I knew we had to talk about it right when I saw it. CJ, number one, the first topic for today: body slams and baptism. This UK church mixes sermons with wrestling so more people will show up. An innovative church in Shipley, England, is tackling declining attendance by hosting monthly wrestling events through a Christian pro wrestling group called Kingdom Wrestling. These events combine WWE style matches with faith based messages and personal testimonies, presenting wrestling as a metaphor for spiritual struggles. While the approach has sparked curiosity and led to baptisms and faith renewals, it also raises questions about blending entertainment with worship. This unique method invites a deeper discussion. Should churches prioritize traditional worship practices over modern entertainment initiatives? CJ, what do you think?
I think this is pretty cool. I know I'm gonna get this wrong. John Wesley, maybe, said, do anything short of sin to bring people to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so if that's not John Wesley, I apologize. Um,
I know the
but
quote though.
but I think it's a pretty cool initiative, and I think having that balance of strong teaching and drawing people to Christ, I think that's an important thing. And if this is being effective in doing it, I say more power to him. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, I think, we do a lot of things like this to help get people to either come to church or be involved in church. I think,
Mhm.
what are we doing on Christmas this year? we're having a kids Christmas program that is going to hopefully invite some family members and stuff like that. I mean, it's also obviously good for the kids, but that's something we're
Right.
doing to hopefully get a few new people into the church. Maybe they come and they see their kid perform and then, or their grandkid perform, and then they say, hey, you know what, church isn't so bad, maybe I'll come
Right.
back in a couple weeks or whatever it might be. You know, when I was growing up, we had a flag football tournament on Thanksgiving at our church that we did. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's one of those things. Now, do I think, you know, you should be replacing, you know, Sunday morning worship with a wrestling match instead of, you know, singing praise songs? I don't know. Maybe that's a little far for me, but at the end of the day, if it gets more people to come to church and it has more people involved and maybe serving because it's something that you can kind of open the door to church and
Hmm.
Christianity with, I think that's great. As long as your focus is not, hey, we are a church, so that way we can have a wrestling ring in our community. You know, as long as you are a church first and you're trying to use wrestling to help worship
Right.
God and help people, you know, find Him, I think that's the biggest thing. CJ, Kingdom Wrestling has reportedly led to baptisms and spiritual growth for some individuals. Do you think results like this justify unconventional approaches? Maybe not just the wrestling thing, but maybe some other unconventional approaches that other people have had. And should there be limits to what churches do to attract members? As some people will say, you know, if a church is only trying to attract new members, they're not doing enough for the people who go there. They're not doing enough for the spiritual formation, for the spiritual growth of their members. What are your thoughts?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, I say this to our students all the time. I say, you know what? God has given each of you different gifts and different passions and different talents and different abilities to be used for his kingdom. And so I think that if a church can find people that are willing to use their gifts and passions and talents and abilities for God's kingdom, whether that's wrestling or anything, again, anything short of sin, I mean, man, I think that is a beautiful thing, and I think that's the beauty of the church is that we can come together and what I enjoy and am passionate about may not be the same as what the person sitting 3 rows back from me enjoys and is passionate about. But my circle of influence is now going to be able to combine with their circle of influence and reach more people. And so I think that if a church can have different special events and ways to incorporate more people's passions, gifts, and abilities, I think that that it can be this incredible movement where God works and moves. There's a really old movie called 7 Days in Utopia. Have you seen it, John?
I
It's
have
like a
not. No.
golfing movie. Okay, well, it's a really old movie called 7 Days in Utopia. It was like right at the start of like Christian movies starting to come out. And one of the lines that I absolutely love from this movie is, "I love tradition, but I'm passionate about the truth."
Mm,
And the basic point of what he was saying this to the other character in the movie is tradition is great and it can do great things, but we can't get so stuck in our traditions and the way that we do things that we lose sight of the truth. And if we can stay focused on the truth, then I'm convinced that the church can look radically different than the way it's looked every single Sunday, for the last, few hundred years. And if that's the way God wants to move and change things, then I think that's a beautiful thing. Now, again, we want to reach as many people as possible, and so there has to be a balance there of reaching people and growing people and helping people improve in their faith and find their own gifts and passions and talents and abilities and using those for God's kingdom and going out and doing kingdom work. But man, again, I'm love tradition, but I'm passionate about the truth. And if we can go out and allow people to use their own unique talents to spread God's truth, that's a beautiful thing.
yeah.
So, what
Yeah.
are
I
your
think
thoughts, John? I know I kind of rambled there. I
no,
apologize.
I like what you had to say. You know, I think it's really interesting. Back in COVID, we talked. Well, I don't know I heard a lot of people talk about, and I talked with Hannah and some other people a lot about how in COVID everybody had a different method. We were all trying to spread the same truth. We were all trying to spread the same message, but everybody had a different method with what they were doing. We had drive-in church. There were
Absolutely.
other people that had online church, and we did online church too. It's not like we didn't do that, but like there were so many different methods that people had
Yep.
out there. And some people wanted to get into arguments about like, well, what was the best method? Like what should you do? What does the church say, or what does the Bible say that a church should be doing? And at a certain point, like I'd get so frustrated. I'd be like, look, we're all trying to preach the same message. Like we're all trying to
Right.
preach the name of Jesus and help people worship it. Like we're all trying to get that done. At the end of the day, why do we all have to have the same method? Why do we all have to have the same traditions? Right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
whatever we can do to help more people hear about Jesus and know him, I think that's great. And I think that it's good when churches do stray away from do I think it's good when churches don't just all do the exact same thing, because
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are different, and I think a lot of people gravitate towards certain things and don't gravitate towards certain things as well.
Yep.
Now, I don't think our faith should be so fickle that we won't worship God unless it's done in the the way that we think is best. But I do think there are people out there that they have a better opportunity to be introduced to the gospel by a pro wrestling setup rather than
Right.
a flower shop setup. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
and both are fine. I don't have a problem with either of them. Personally, I'd be a little bit more for the pro wrestling rather than the flower shop, but that's just me. Maybe somebody else is different. So, does that make sense? Am I rambling, or does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, and I would say also that um, a lot of times we wait for the church to act and try to jump on board with what the church as a building or an organization is doing when we are the church, and so we can go
Hmm.
out and we can go serve, we can go participate in the things that we're passionate about and spread the love of Jesus and be the church, even if it's not the whole church coming together to do those things. And the cool thing is that sometimes when you start on your own, then you gather enough people around you that you can say, "Hey, let's make this a part of our Sunday morning uh, worship service, and let's make it look different." And I think God can use us in incredible ways when we do that.
Don't worry, everybody. I will not start a wrestling ring in Kids Zone. That is not starting this Sunday. So I've not gotten any ideas. No, I think it's a great point, CJ. So, all right, let's move on to the next one, CJ. TD Jakes. Have you heard of TD Jakes, CJ?
Yep,
Okay, so TD
sure
Jakes
have.
is a preacher at the Potter House Church in Dallas, and he had a health scare during one of his Sunday sermons. Bishop TD Jakes, the Potter House Church in Dallas, experienced a health scare during his sermon, alarming the congregation as he visibly convulsed on stage. While the church confirmed that he is now stable and under medical care, the incident highlighted the intense demands of ministry on leaders' physical and spiritual well-beings. Jake's family and the church have expressed gratitude for the outpouring of prayers, but the event has also sparked some mixed reactions online, maybe not just by the church members, but other people as well, with some framing it as a divine judgment due to theological disagreements with what TD Jakes has preached, because he does have a little bit of a there are people that think that TD Jakes is a false teacher, and it raises important questions on how a congregation can better support their leaders and how believers should approach such moments with grace and understanding rather than condemnation. So, just to be clear, for me personally, I do think that TD Jakes is kind of on the health and wealth gospel a little bit more than I personally would be. So I don't necessarily agree with all of his teachings in that way, but I would never go as to say that I would wish harm on somebody for something like that. So I do think there is a bit of a discussion here, especially with some of the discourse that I've seen online about people saying, like I said there, oh, he had it coming, this is God condemning him, that kind of stuff, things like that. CJ, what does this health scare tell us about the physical and spiritual toll of ministry on ministers, and how can congregations better support the well-beings of their leader? We'll talk about the disagreement stuff in a minute, but just health and stuff like that in ministry. What's your thoughts?
Well, I do think that just like lots and lots of jobs, ministry is very demanding. I think there's a thought that ministers only work once a week, and as a minister, I can attest to the fact that it is a job that happens. Man, it's almost 24/7, and we have to be really, really intentional as ministers and as a family that is a part of ministry to guard our time. Because if we allowed it to, then the church would just it would just consume all of our time. And so I know it's easy to look at what we do and say, "Hey, they just work on Sundays." Um, but it is something that eh, I'll be honest, it's demanding. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of emotional energy and physical energy, and so it is really demanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's demanding. One of the things that I always point out to people when they ask, kind of like, what is it about ministry? Because and I have people ask that at times, not accusing me of only working one day a week, but just asking the question, like, I know you work on Sundays, but like, what else is so
Hmm.
demanding about the job? And I tell people, like, if you're a minister, you are caring for the congregation, you are caring for your flock, and you are being there in every situation. And so a lot of times when people in your congregation are hurting, you are also hurting for them.
Hmm.
And so then not only are you as a minister, I mean, we have our own lives too. We have our own hurts. We have our own things that go on. Obviously, things aren't perfect in our lives, but in addition to that, we're also doing our best to care for other people. We're also doing our
Hmm.
best to think about other people, and some ministers uh, they do that to a fault at times. I mean, there are a lot of ministers who are no longer in ministry because they have neglected their own lives for the
Hmm.
lives of the people in the congregation and stuff, which is admirable. Don't get me wrong. I think that it's important that they care that much, but you're not going to last very long in ministry if you put others. It sounds like I'm advocating for somebody to be selfish. I'm not advocating for them to be selfish, but when you
You're just advocating for boundaries,
right,
which is
boundaries, that's a
healthy
good
in
word.
all relationships in our lives.
Right, exactly, and I appreciate you saying that. That was much better than what I was getting at there. But overall, like that can be a piece of it. Now, I have no idea, if that happened to TD Jakes, and that's why he had, this issue and stuff like that. But I just know from like that standpoint, sometimes it can be easy to say, well, I'm not going to go exercise this morning because I need to get this done before I go visit this person and do this thing and yada yada yada. Oh, I'm not, I'm going to have a burger at lunch today while I'm on my way to doing this, that, and the other, or oh, I'm stressed out and I can't do this, so I'm just going to go eat the quickest thing, or whatever it might be, like stuff like that. And that might sound like a bit of an excuse, and I get it to some people, but it's what I found in my personal experience. And I think that when you ask a minister his personal experience about trying to have good health and good boundaries in his life, I think you'll find that a lot of ministers have a different way of trying to reconcile with that and stuff. So,
Hmm.
CJ, the other part of it is that there were some people, mostly online. It doesn't sound like there was really anybody in the church that was acting this way. But why do you think people view the situation with TD Jakes' health scare as a moment of judgment or like a deserved consequence? And how should we respond when such perspectives from a faith-based viewpoint happen and something, uh, like this, like something bad, like a health scare, happens to somebody else? What's your thoughts there?
Well, I think that people are always going to lash out. It seems like that's the norm these days. Is that when we disagree, we tend to lash out, which is a really unhealthy starting point. And so when we come into contact with someone that is lashing out at someone else, I think the thing that we can't do is continue to lash out at the person that's lashing out. That just continues the cycle, compounds the problem. I don't think that's a healthy thing to get into an argument or a result, or not a result, get into an argument or lash out at that person. I do think that what we can do is what the church has done for TD Jakes is just gather around the person and support them. I think in these moments where someone has a health scare, uh, we don't know why health scares happen. It
Mhm.
is just a part of being in this world. Now, me personally, I don't believe in the whole "you're being punished." I think we live in a world where people get sick and it's not fair and it happens, and man, we wish that it wouldn't. And so the best thing that I think that we can do is to come alongside that person and express that they are loved and they're valuable, and just encourage them, encourage their families in those moments, and really just kind of build them up and support them in those moments.
Yeah.
But for the person that is lashing out, I think if you don't have a personal relationship with them, ignore them. If you do have a personal relationship with them, I think the best thing you can do is not lash out back, and just have a conversation, ask some questions, dig into how they're feeling. The old adage, I know I'm using a lot of phrases, but hurt people.
Hmm.
And so, figure out what's going on in their lives, and it's possible that maybe they are hurting in this moment, and just the way that they are reacting to their own hurt is to hurt somebody else. And so we can come alongside those people in our own lives as well and say, let me help you, let me support you, let me build you up in this moment.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think, I always tell people in situations like this where somebody is trying to stand on the truth and the message of God, I appreciate that people want to do that. And I appreciate that people have a passion for the truth and good biblical teaching and that kind of stuff. I do appreciate that that's there. But I also think that with a lot of things, it can be taken too far. And sometimes we can see, somebody's doing something we disagree with and say, "Oh, well, obviously something bad should happen to that person." Well, I think that that's for God to decide, and I think if nothing else, we just need to pray for that person.
Mhm.
If you believe that they are teaching something wrong, then you would pray that God would open their eyes and that they would open their hearts to God to, what is correct and what is true. Even if you don't know that person personally, you pray for good health for them. You pray for those who are around them that love them and care for them and want to see them be okay. Pray for them to be comforted. And at the end of the day, if I had a friend that this happened to and I had a disagreement with the way that, you know, he was teaching or preaching or something like that, it wouldn't be the first thing I'd bring up to him in the hospital. I wouldn't say, "Hey, buddy,
Right,
this is this is why." I probably wouldn't do that. I'd be there for him. I'd care for him. I'd help
right.
him. And then if the opportunity presented itself, I might say, "Hey, have you re-examined what you're teaching lately? Have you thought about it?" And like you said, ask questions, have a conversation, and do some of that stuff. But I by no means would I ever go to them and say,
Right. Yeah, I
"Hey,
don't
God doesn't
know.
like you."
Right. I don't know that I would even approach their teaching at that point. If I've not approached it in the past, I would ask more questions to the person that's lashing out at
Mm,
the person that is sick. The person that's sick is
mhm,
just pure, from my perspective, is just pure support
mhm.
and love, and
Yeah.
um yeah.
I think
So
that's the main thing you and I are both advocating for is peace,
absolutely.
support, help
Absolutely.
them however you can, all that stuff. Yeah. So
Yep.
that's for sure. All right. Anything else on that, CJ?
I don't think so.
All right. Another popular group. This will be our last topic of discussion. The Newsboys. You remember the Newsboys, right, CJ?
Oh, I love the Newsboys.
And they're still around. They're still doing it.
They are. They are. I listened to them in middle school and high school, and still enjoy their music today, and
Yeah.
love seeing them at Winter Jam when I
I
take
was gonna ask, were they at Winter Jam last year?
not last year, the 2
Okay.
years ago, I believe they
Two
were at
years.
Winter Jam.
All right. Well, Newsboys got onto a Christian podcast and they were speaking out on deconstruction in Christian music. In a recent interview, Michael Tate and Jeff Frankenstein, or is it Frankenstein or Frankenstein? I think it's Stein.
I'm not sure how I pronounce his
Yeah,
last name.
I think it's Frankenstein, but it does look like Frankenstein.
Hmm.
Of the Newsboys share their thoughts on the rising trend of faith deconstruction within Christian circles. They emphasize the importance of responding to such journeys with compassion rather than judgment, suggesting that hypocrisy is often uh, in the church often drives people away from faith. They also noted that doubt can, while challenging, can lead to deeper faith when approached with honesty and willingness to seek answers. Their insights invite reflection on how the church can better support those wrestling with their beliefs and whether doubt should be seen as a potential catalyst for spiritual growth. CJ, I listened to this interview entirely because I like the person that was doing it. Blanking on his name right now. Oh, I'll remember it here in a second, but I listened to it. I really liked it. I thought the Newsboys had some good things to say. Do you agree with the approach of responding to someone's doubts or deconstruction with compassion instead of judgment? I think I know the answer there. And then how do you think an approach might impact their spiritual journey?
Well, you know me well, John. I think, man, I totally agree. Responding with compassion, and I think if we look at our own lives, and if someone came to us and said, "You're doing it wrong," and "You can't do this," I mean, I'm a pretty laid back guy, but the moment somebody says, "Oh, dude, you can't do this," like my initial response is, "Watch me," like,
Yeah.
and so, when we tend to do that with in our Christian circles, we're just kind of pushing people away from the ultimate goal of them moving closer to Jesus. And I know deconstruction is super polarizing right now. I personally am on the side of deconstruction can be a super, super, super healthy thing. As a person that grew up, and they talk about this in the article in the 80s and the 90s, where it was like, you're going to be a Christian. You have no choice. These are the rules you're going to follow. You have no choice. I think it's a good thing to kind of dial things back and say, all right, who is this Jesus person that I'm following? And I think that can really deepen your faith and strengthen your relationship with God. And so I think that can be a really healthy thing. And I think some people have gotten lost in deconstruction and decided to step away from Jesus. And at the end of the day, we have to recognize that some people are going to do that. And it's really sad when people do that and don't make a decision for Jesus. But I think the worst thing that we can do when someone says, I'm stepping away, when we respond in judgment, I think that's the worst thing we can do because there's nothing in them that's going to say, well, yeah, I'm going to come back to that. Once we respond in judgment, they're like, yeah, that's why I stepped away in the first place. So I think responding with compassion is so, so important. So important. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts, John?
First off, it was Sean McDowell. That's the one who did the interview. So I blanked on his name for a second. No, I totally agree with you. I think that you're exactly right. When deconstruction is just one of those kind of like trigger words for some people nowadays because they've
Hmm.
heard so much about like, well, this person deconstructed their faith and now they have no faith at all, and kind of what goes on there. But I do think that deconstruction can be a good thing. I think it can deepen your faith. I think that it can help you better understand things about your faith better. And I think that, you know, we shouldn't so much judge somebody for deconstructing more than we should come alongside them and say, hey, I'm going to be there with you while you do it. I'm going to
Yes.
be there for answering questions if you have them. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to do all these things. I'm not going to judge you because at the end of the day, deconstruction, sure, it can lead you away from faith, but it can also take you further deeper into your faith than you ever had before.
Yes.
And so it is kind of like you know, two different sides there of what can happen. But I
Right.
think that if somebody is struggling so much that they are not even sure if what they believe is true and what they're going through, they have like they can't keep going on with it. They have to deconstruct in some way, shape, or form. I, I, I don't think they're better off in that state of confusion, in that state
Mhm.
of not being able to decide what to do and
Mhm.
where they should go. And so, like I said, the most important thing to me is that we would just walk alongside them and we would be there for them if they ever need anything or if they ever have any
Mhm.
questions. And say they do walk away from their faith, at least they know that person was always good to me. And if I ever do need anything, I can go back to that person.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So,
And
CJ,
I think it's really
go
I
ahead.
think it's really important that we recognize that one of the things that, as Jesus followers, that we believe in, and one of the things that we talk about often is making our faith our own. Like we have to
Mm,
own our own faith. It has to be something that we have decided on for ourselves. And so I think it's really important when you hear people saying, I'm deconstructing, that you recognize that maybe that's part of the process for them for making their faith their own. And would it be healthier for them to stay in a faith that they have been coerced into or forced into? Or would it be healthier for them to say, all right, I'm going to step out and I'm going to make this my own. And I'm going to say, I want to follow this Jesus guy because I want to follow this Jesus guy. And so I think as we consider deconstruction, and I know there can be a lot of judgment in that, that we recognize that a lot of times people are just trying to make their faith their own. And I think that we've seen some high profile people walk away from their faith, and we can use that sometimes as a scare tactic for saying, oh, don't do that. But at the end of the day, man, if we can help people get Jesus in their heart for themselves, that's a great thing. So I agree.
yeah,
Walk alongside them, answer their questions, be there for them in a loving and compassionate way, for sure.
I um, I just remembered something that happened to me freshman year in high school, and I think it's a really good example. But I'm also coming up with it on the fly as we're talking here, so bear with me for just a second.
All right,
Uh,
let's hear it.
when I was a freshman in high school, I took ag class, and a big part of ag class was working, with wood and building and constructing things and stuff like that. And our ag teacher, we learned all kinds of stuff that year. It was crazy the amount of stuff that I learned how to weld. I never thought I'd learn how to weld, but I did that my
That's
freshman year in
cool.
high school. That was awesome. But the very first day we came to class, we sat down and he came up in front of the class and told everybody that you weren't going to sit in your seats very often, and more often than not you were going to be up out of your seats doing stuff, because he was one of those people that didn't think you learned by sitting down and just doing nothing. So I was like, all right, this is cool. So we went out into the shop, and he had a sandbox made out of wood, and he said, I today I'm going to teach all of you how to build this sandbox. He said, and by the end of the week, all of you will build your own sandbox. We were like, wow, okay, our very first week of class. He said, but I'm not going to build it for you, and I'm not going to show you how to do it. He said, I'm going to take this sandbox box apart, and you guys are going to watch me, and then you're going to have to go put your own together. And we were like,
Mhm.
what? And he was like, you're going to learn more from me deconstructing the sandbox rather than you watching me build it up, because you also need to understand how did it go together, what happened with it, because it doesn't make any sense for me just to hand you pieces and say build a sandbox, because you already have
Right.
the pieces for it. And so now I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking to myself, how much better understanding did I have of how that sandbox went together and what happened, because he didn't just come out into the shop and say, here's a sandbox. This is what it is. This is what a sandbox is. We came
Right.
out there and he said, here's what it is. Now let's take it apart so that way you can put it back together. And I think in a
Right.
lot of ways, that's kind of what deconstruction of our faith is. We take it apart. And then if, we have the proper people around us to help us, we can put it back together in such a way that builds our faith up more than ever even was before.
Right.
So,
Absolutely, man. That's a great example.
um, thank you. Michael Tate, he, of course, the lead singer of the Newsboys these days, he talked about doubt and how he feels like doubt can actually play a positive role in people's spiritual growth. And
Hmm.
it can be kind of a challenge for people to overcome and come out with a better understanding of their faith. He kind of used story of what I think it was in the article. I think he talked about Paul and his doubt and what he went through and how he came out on the other end more inspired and had a deeper faith because of it. CJ, do you
Mhm.
agree that doubt can sometimes be a good thing for us and it can sometimes lead to us having a deeper faith rather than just ignoring it and say, I'm never going to worry about that. I'm just going to live my life and never think about my doubt?
100%. I think that when we can step into our doubts and we can begin to ask questions and we can begin to seek answers, that's where growth happens. That's where strength builds. And man, I've always been a firm believer that God can handle our biggest doubts and our biggest fears and our largest questions. And so when we can go to God and genuinely uh, be honest with Him and say, I don't get it, God. I don't know why you do what you do. I don't understand. Help me understand. And we begin to search for answers. God's going to show up, um and our relationship with Him is stronger, and our relationship with our faith is stronger. When I think about my own kids, if they have doubts for why I do what I do or why I'm behaving a certain way that I'm behaving, the last thing I want them to do is just kind of ignore those doubts and assume that they know the answer and treat me in a way that they have assumed, and that assumption may be wrong. I would much rather them come to me and be like, Dad, I'm not sure I agree with you on this. Why are you doing this the way they're doing this? And have a conversation. Not only am I answering their questions, but it creates a bond between us and a better relationship with us. And I think that's the way that God feels about us too. He wants us to come to Him. He wants us to ask questions and dig deeper and build that relationship. And He can handle our biggest doubts. There's not a doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've always told people that the worst thing that doubt can ever do to you is just make you not even worry about God, not even think about God, not even be concerned with God anymore in your life, and just say, well, I doubt so much, I'm never going to do anything with it, or God doesn't want to hear about my doubt, so I'm just going to live my life and not care. The truth is that, like you said, there's no doubt that God can't handle, and
Hmm.
if we truly go to Him and we truly acknowledge it, then he's going to be there for us, and he's going to be able to tackle it and help us through it, and he's going to send others into our lives to help us as well. I confidently believe
Yep.
that. So
Yep.
so yeah. um Good stuff there, CJ. Anything else on that before
Right.
we get out of here?
Just out of curiosity, I'm gonna show my age a little bit. So Michael Tate, lead singer of the Newsboys, used to be a part of DC Talk. Were you
Hmm.
ever a DC Talk listener, John?
I was, yeah. Toby Mac
Yeah,
and
there we go.
Michael Tate. Even after they split up, I still Toby Mac has a Christmas album that I really enjoy. We always listen to it, and it's got some kind of upbeat songs on it and stuff that my kids enjoy. So they always have a good time
Yes.
with it. Yeah, yeah. So
Yes.
I
Sure.
really like Toby. Who was the other one? There was it three of them?
Michael, Kevin Max.
Kevin Max. That's right. Okay.
Kevin
Yeah,
Max.
he's
Yep.
always one I forget. no, no offense to Kevin, but yeah. So I still
Yep.
remember, what was it, Breakfast or something like that. There was a song Breakfast
Oh,
that the
by the
Newsboys did.
Newsboys. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't.
Yep.
Was Michael Tate still there when they had that one?
That was a really old one. That was before Michael Tate, but then
Yeah,
they came back and did like a reunion tour,
yeah.
and uh and he jumped in with the former lead singer,
Who was the
and they
bald
did
guy,
a
right?
yep, yep,
Yeah,
you got it.
yeah.
You got it.
Love Liberty Disco. Remember that song as well.
Oh, absolutely.
I
We're
love the
going way
Newsboys
back
growing up.
now.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you're on YouTube, we're going to let CJ tell you anything that's going on in the student ministry really fast, if there's any way people can help. And then we will send you off with the rest of your Thanksgiving. CJ, anything going on in the student ministry you want to tell people about?
Well, we've got a couple weeks off here. We did not meet this last Sunday. We had our Thanksgiving dinner here at church, and Thanksgiving weekend, we always give the students just the time to spend with their families, but we'll be back the first week in December. And so we're always looking for meals for our students. That's always a really vital part. So if you want to help us out with that, um, you can email me and I'll get you in touch with the person. We'll put my email in the description so that that's easily accessible. And then, man, if you just know students that would love to come and have a good time with us on Sunday nights and grow deeper in their faith, we would love to have them. Open gym is at 5, super relaxed, and then Worship Uncoiled starts at 6 and runs to 8, includes a full meal and games and a lesson and small groups and worship and just a really good night. So we'd love to have any student 6th grade through 12th grade that's interested in being there.
Sounds like a great place for 6th grade through 12th graders to be. A meal, gym,
Oh
prizes.
yeah, can't beat it.
Who wouldn't want to be there? All right. Thanks, CJ. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right. See you guys.